This week, President Trump traveled 14,000 miles round trip to China for a 48-hour summit, which historians are already calling could have been an email. President Trump arrived in China, but instead of Xi Jinping, he was greeted by the country's vice president, Han Zhang, or as Trump called him, Xi Jinping.
President Trump was greeted at the Great Hall of the People by school children jumping up and down in excitement, shouting, "It's the man from the hats we make."
Saturday Night Live with those jokes about Donald Trump's trip to China. Welcome to Morning Joe. Good morning. It's Monday, May 18th, and with us we have co-host of our 9 a.m. hour, staff writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire. He's got a fascinating new article out. Also co-host of the Rest is Politics podcast, the BBC's Caddy K. Editor at The Insider, Michael Weiss. Columnist and associate editor at The Washington Post, David Ignatius. And managing editor at The Bulwark, Sam Stein. And so much to talk about. Really quickly, though, Jonathan Lemire, an incredible NBA game last night you can talk about for a second. But I think yesterday proved to us, answered the eternal question, would you rather the Red Sox win or the Yankees lose? I must say you were far more excited about the Yankees losing yesterday and the way they lost than you've been excited about the Red Sox in a very long time.
Well, there's not much to be excited about for the 2026 edition of the Boston Red Sox. Now, for me, that's an ongoing question. Even in good Red Sox seasons, I admit sometimes I get happier about the Yankees losing. This year, it's not close. Red Sox, another lifeless loss. We don't want to see Brayan Bello anywhere near the pitcher's mound again anytime soon. I was delighted in the Yankees blowing a lead in the ninth and then losing extra innings to their crosstown rivals, the New York Mets. A ray of sunshine, Joe, and otherwise a pretty dismal baseball season. And yes, we now have our conference finals set in the NBA. We already knew. We have Spurs Thunder out west. That's going to be a heavyweight fight. And then yesterday in a Game 7 in Detroit, the Cleveland Cavaliers just took care of business. They led throughout. They ended up winning handily on the road. So now we get Cavaliers, Knicks. The New York Knicks feels like they have not played since February because they finished up their second-round matchup so early, and they will be the heavy favorites in this round, 4 wins away from the finals.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. And Caddy K, City still chasing the Premier League championship. It's getting closer and closer. We'll see how that goes. But also over the weekend, Donald Trump, once again, issuing threats to Iran, once again ignoring him.
Yeah. Can I just say, not a ton of optimism in my house about City's prospects.
No.
My husband seems to be a little gloomy at the moment. My son, the Arsenal supporter, he's the happy one at home at the moment.
Very happy.
President Trump, who knows if he's happy or not, but he is once again issuing an apocalyptic threat to Iran, as you said, posting on Truth Social yesterday, quote, "The clock is ticking and they better get moving fast or there won't be anything left of them." That familiar, ominous warning came shortly after the president spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu about the war. It also comes as Axios is reporting that the president is expected to convene his top national security team in the Situation Room tomorrow to discuss all of the military options. That's according to 2 American officials. And as the future of that conflict remains uncertain, Ukraine, meanwhile, is escalating its attacks on Russia, hitting Moscow with the deadliest strike in that city since Vladimir Putin's invasion more than 4 years ago. 3 people were killed and at least a dozen injured Saturday, in drone strikes on the Russian capital and surrounding areas. Russia's defense ministry claimed that more than 550 drones were shot down across the country over the weekend. The bombardment comes just days after a Russian attack killed at least 24 people in Kyiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said on social media yesterday that the use of long-range attacks has, quote, significantly changed the situation and, more broadly, the world's perception of Russia's war. More on conflicts. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is making a move in Eastern Europe that on its surface does appear to help Russia. The Department of Defense has cancelled the planned deployment of more than 4,000 troops to Poland. That comes after the DoD announced another withdrawal of 5,000 troops from Germany. That reduction is seen as a direct response to a comment from Germany's chancellor saying that Iran has, quote, humiliated the United States. The New York Times reports it was unclear why Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth cancelled the deployment to Poland, which has close relations with the United States and had been considered a possible location for some of the forces that are now leaving Germany to go to. Reports say that Pentagon officials were blindsided by Secretary Hegseth's order to stop the deployments. Troops and equipment had already started to arrive in Poland before the decision to change came about. A Pentagon spokesperson has declined to comment on the decision. So that's Europe and those conflicts. Meanwhile, in Asia, President Trump is leaving another ally in limbo, suggesting in an interview with Fox News last week that a potential multi-billion-dollar weapons sale with Taiwan could now be used as, quote, a negotiating chip with China.
Should the people of Taiwan feel more or less secure after your meetings with President Xi?
Neutral. Neutral. This
Has the policy changed at all?
No, nothing's
U.S.
changed.
policy. But you're waiting on approving billions of dollars of weapons for Taiwan.
That's right.
Is that
I'm
moving
holding
forward?
it. Well, I haven't approved it yet. We're going to see what happens.
What are you looking
I may
for?
do it. I may not do it.
Yeah, what's your hinge point?
Well, I'm not going to say that, but I may do it. I may not do it. But we're not looking to have wars. And if you kept it the way it is, I think China's going to be okay with that. But we're not looking to have somebody say, let's go independent because the United States is backing us. You know,
So President Xi probably liked that you haven't approved the weapons to Taiwan.
I would say like is maybe too strong a word because he thinks I could do it with just the signing of my signature, unlike Biden who couldn't sign his signature. No, I'm holding that in abeyance, and it depends on China. It depends. It's a very good negotiating chip for us, frankly. It's a lot of weapons. It's $12 billion. It's a lot of weapons.
That sale is seen as a big test of this China visit that the president went on last week. And the president's comments come, of course, on the heels of his talks with Xi in Beijing, where the Chinese leader told Trump the Taiwan issue is the most critical issue in China-U.S. relations, warning that if the matter was mishandled, it could put the entire U.S.-China relationship in an extremely dangerous position. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer tried to clarify the president's remarks, saying in an interview on ABC News yesterday, there is, quote, no change in American policy on Taiwan. House Speaker Mike Johnson also told Fox News yesterday, quote, China cannot just go over and take the land, and we're going to stand strong and resolute by that. And I know the Congress will. And Joe, you also heard Marco Rubio saying that it wouldn't be a good idea if China just went over and took Taiwan by force, that would be a disaster, was the way that he put it. But this arms sale, if we're going to look at what comes out of that meeting in China, clearly this arms sale, this long-delayed arms sale, is one of the key tests of whether Trump has softened America's position on Taiwan for China.
Right. Well, Taiwan and the world will not listen to what Marco Rubio is saying, won't listen to what a trade representative is saying, because David Ignatius, no president has ever kowtowed to a communist Chinese leader the way Donald Trump did in his words and in his interview. There's so many things that Caddy read out. Any one of these would be a lead any year. I just want to go through them, and I will let you choose sort of a potpourri of horrors that you can choose from, David. We just saw the abandonment of Taiwan there, speaking in a way no American president ever has. And, of course, his kowtowing to Xi, the things he said about Xi. Of course, the continued insults towards Ukraine and attacks on NATO, the cancellation of a deployment of troops to who even Donald Trump has said is a good ally, Poland. The abandonment of Germany, sending a message that we're taking troops out of Germany, and more threats from Donald Trump with Iran, and less good options for him. You look what's happening with Qatar. They're at a crisis moment. The UAE got attacked, but fortunately, reports no radioactive fallout from that attack. But the president's poll numbers keep collapsing. But the theme here seems to be the embrace of enemies and the abandonment of allies. Talk about all of what you've seen over the past weekend.
Joe, I'd have the same basic organizing theme that what we're seeing around the world is that it's hard to be America's friend and ally, and that it's easier to be a strong and sometimes belligerent adversary like China. There's a lively debate taking on among people I respect about just how to think about President Trump's China trip. Some people, prominent commentators, Fareed Zakaria of CNN is one, Graham Allison, who teaches at the Harvard Kennedy School, is another, who say that this visit produced, because Trump was so deferential, flattering, produced a degree of stability and cooperation in the relationship that's necessary. There's another group, and I would put myself in that camp, that would say, no, this really ratified China's rise. She's rise to a position of real parity with the United States, what people call a G2, the two great superpowers, and it also ratified America's decline. Trump came back with very little of what was expected from this trip. He didn't get as many Boeing plane sales even. He didn't get as many agricultural goodies. And he also managed to put Taiwan in play. I don't think it's too much to say that he's capitulated on the Taiwan question. There's still ambiguous language. But Taiwan's in play. It's a negotiating chip. You just hear in his voice that he's getting ready to deal. As you look around the map, the Trump administration's actions in Europe, to me, are incomprehensible. At a time when Europe is threatened in a way it hasn't been for decades by Russian expansionist power. Russians are fighting real sabotage campaigns in Europe right now. And this is the time that Donald Trump decides he's going to reduce American support for Germany. And I think even more disturbing, to pull back these troops from Poland, a frontline state, which is right there on the Russian border, feeling very menaced by Russia. So it's a time when the basic principle that we often talk about on this show, the strength the United States has in having so many strong allies around the world, is, to my mind, being ignored. The debate over China is its biggest issue of our lifetimes, figuring out the right relationship between the United States and China. And this trip was a way station in a very long story. But you'd have to say at the end of that visit, the scorecard shows Xi getting what he wanted and Trump generally not getting what he wanted. And that should be concerning for people who want a strong America that can deter a rising China rather than simply accede to its power.
Michael Weiss, I certainly respect people on both sides trying to figure out exactly, sort through why the president was so deferential to President Xi. And they can have that debate, but if you just take a couple of steps back, you see a very clear pattern, as David said, the president being terrible to our closest historic allies, the same allies that helped us take down the Soviet Union, and embracing actually people who consider the collapse of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical tragedy of the 20th century. Again, let me just say it again. While the president's saying, I don't know, maybe we don't give Taiwan weapons because that's a lot of money. At the same time he's doing that, he's abandoning Germany. He's abandoning Poland, sending very clear messages to Vladimir Putin, just like he did when he supported Orban in a failing effort. I mean, and Ukraine, this is a crazy thing. Like, the president is going all in with the losing side. It was one thing when they went around lying, and I talked about this repeatedly. They have lied repeatedly for years, saying that Ukraine is about to collapse. They've continued the lying, and we've called out their lying repeatedly, saying, oh, they'll have the Donbass next month. Oh, Russia's about to overrun them. They need it. You've heard the lies. It has been constant. It has been continual. And even now that they know that they're on the losing side, they're upping the ante by abandoning Germany, by abandoning Poland, the country Putin would go to right after Ukraine. And then you have Taiwan hearing this as well. It has been, I suppose, a head-spinning weekend for American allies, except for the fact they've seen all too much of this over the past decade from Donald Trump.
I spent the weekend talking to Polish government officials, Joe, and they were absolutely flabbergasted by this decision. You know, they were making a concerted play, a lobbying effort, if you like, to try and get those 5,000 troops that we're pulling out of Germany onto Polish soil. And then it turns out these 4,000 troops that were meant to be rotated in are now canceled. You know, the Poles make a big deal about trying to cater to what Bridge Colby, the head of policy planning at DoD, calls NATO 3.0. Strong, stalwart allies that not only do their fair share, but go above and beyond, right? Poland is approaching 5% spending on GDP. It's going to become one of the most militarized countries in Europe. It has secure borders. It ticks all the boxes that MAGA pretends to want to care about with respect to the transatlantic relationship. And the best part, according to the Poles, is they pay for the infrastructure of hosting U.S. troops, which is something not even Germany does, right? Fuel costs for American garrisons in Poland, they pay 50% of. So they're actually footing the bill for this. They cannot understand for the life of them why the United States would want to pull troops away when everyone in Europe is preparing for the next confrontation with Russia, right? I mean, you talk about Ukraine over the weekend, the biggest drone bombardment of Moscow, I think, in a year's time. You know, we keep hearing that Zelensky has no cards. The Ukrainians are faded. It's inevitable. They're going to lose Donbass. They're going to lose this war. Tulsi Gabbard goes on about how Russia has the upper hand. What did this demonstrate over the weekend? It demonstrated that there, but for the grace of Volodymyr Zelensky, Putin's big parade, his Victory Day parade in Red Square, was allowed to take place. This is what the Ukrainians can now do. And these drones that they're using are domestically sourced. They're domestically manufactured at scale, which also highlights or telegraphs to the West they are the center of gravity for all military technological innovation. We are at a state now, and I keep telling you this on the show because it's very important, I think. We need Ukraine more than they need us. Right? We share intelligence with them for the purposes of striking Russian energy infrastructure, military targets, but they share intelligence back with us. You know, they recruit Russian assets. They've been doing this since 2014. They speak the language fluently. They have a massive penetration inside Russian society and inside all levers of or all elements of the Russian state. We're going to need them. They're already a de facto NATO ally. You know, we just don't realize it yet, or some of us in the U.S. government don't realize it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Ukraine has the best fighting force in all of Europe. David Petraeus says you want to see the future of warfare. It's happening right now in Ukraine. Had the Secretary of Army say the same thing. They're doing extraordinary things in Ukraine, and still Donald Trump continues to do everything he can by abandoning our allies in Germany, abandoning our allies in Poland, constantly fighting NATO, abandoning the Ukrainians, continually abandoning the Ukrainians, anything to provide aid and comfort to Vladimir Putin, and none of it working. You know, this weekend, I was thinking, and we often see this as people get older, Jonathan Lemire. I read your article, and I think you're so right. Any suggestion that Donald Trump has dementia or is losing mind, whatever, it's ridiculous. I said the same thing about Joe Biden. Went and talked to him for 3 hours, and yes, Biden was moving very slow, very stiff. Donald Trump may be slowing down, but I think what we're really seeing here, and what I really pulled from your article, is that for the president who's about to turn 80 this next month, for a president who has always been erratic, as he turns 80, we are seeing some diminished capacities with anybody who would turn 80. But that erraticism, we are seeing it exaggerated. And I wonder if that's what we see playing out, where he's just not just saying the quiet part out loud, he's screaming it. He wants to abandon our Polish allies. He wants to abandon Ukraine, as he continues to do. He wants to abandon our German allies. He wants to do everything he can do to help Vladimir Putin. Because make no mistake of it, all the people that have been going around yelling, Russia hoax, Russia hoax, Russia hoax. and will be triggered by this because of their own unique version of Trump derangement syndrome. What you actually have is a president doing everything that Vladimir Putin would want him to do. Just ask anybody that's been in this field, that's been in for Vladimir Putin couldn't call these shots any better himself. And so whatever draws him to Vladimir Putin, whatever drew him to Putin in his 70s, it seems to be even more exaggerated now as he turns 80.
Yeah, we can dig into my piece as the morning goes on. But one thing that really struck me is that there was so much conversation about Joe Biden aging, in part because Joe Biden so visibly changed. He got quieter. He got sort of smaller. It seemed like he was frailer. And while Donald Trump, you know, he still physically sort of looks the same. Yes, there are the bruises on his hands, and yes, he falls asleep frequently now in the Oval Office, but he's a big person, he's a big presence, and he's loud. And that has allowed him to skate past accusations that he might be, in fact, aging or declining. But what's really here, and people I've talked to suggest that as he has aged, he has even less and less of a filter. Now, let's be clear. Donald Trump has never been one for self-censoring, but he is someone who now is more purely himself as he ages. It's disinhibition. There's whatever pops in his head, he says, and he also relies more and more, as you just said, Joe, falls back on these instincts, one of them being reflexively sort of, you know, deference to strongmen, whether that is Xi Jinping in China. We saw that on vivid display last week, and certainly for a decade or more, what we have seen with Vladimir Putin. And there really is no other reason for this. As Michael just laid out, and as David has laid out, as you and I talk about on the show on a near daily basis, Ukraine's made real strides in this war. They, in fact, have so many of the cards, and yet they're still in the White House, from Trump himself and in his top officials, this sort of reflexive, oh, Russia's going to win this, when frankly, all evidence points to the other direction.
And I must say that Michael has been saying it, I've been saying it, Ann Applebaum has been saying it. That's been a lie that they've been carrying for a year now. And make no mistake, right now, if you want to know where the Ukrainians are, they're not just on the front lines, they're all across the Gulf region. Because guess what? Everybody is asking them about the future of warfare and how they defend themselves against the war that Donald Trump started with Iran. Still out on Morning Joe. First of all, it was a lot like the Biden talk I heard. Oh, Biden's lost his mind. He's, ambling around. And yeah, Biden was slow and awkward and stiff and quiet. But I sat there and talked to him for 3 hours, very detailed on foreign policy with Donald Trump. There was none of that, but there was the same, as Jonathan says, the same very vigorous Donald Trump, whose very presence fills up a room. So it is a very different situation with, I think, very different threats. But right now, the threat is being felt by our allies, whether it's Taiwan or what's happened in Ukraine. I will say we can't get clarity, even though there are reports that the $400 million that was authorized in the 26 Congressional Defense Authorization Act. I don't know if Ukraine has gotten that yet. We haven't gotten any signals from them that they have. But even that, even congressional funding becomes a battle on whether Pete Hegseth's Pentagon will release money that Congress has authorized to Ukraine.
Joe, what I'm seeing is that Ukraine in particular, but I think this is true for other countries in Europe, is beginning to realize that it simply can't depend on American aid promised in the pipeline, whatever you wanted to say about it, that they have to begin planning to defend themselves. And we're seeing that. The extraordinary Ukrainian drone strike over the weekend, 650 Ukrainian drones flying toward Moscow and other targets, video footage of refineries in flames in Russia. This is from a country that, when you talk to Trump's negotiating team, they say they're down and out, they're going to be finished in 6 months. Doesn't look like it to me. And so Ukraine and others, I think, are deciding we have to do this ourselves. Talking to Germans, there's a recognition we have to arm ourselves. Americans are taking troops out of Germany. The old paradigm is really broken now. So you're going to see Germany, a country, rearm, even begin to think about, does it need nuclear weapons? Who would have imagined that Germany would be having that debate? But that's, again, a result of Trump. Imagine if you're the Japanese prime minister watching this Trump visit to Beijing. I mean, she is way out there exposed in defying President Xi Jinping. And she now feels that she's been basically cut off. So what did the Japanese do to protect their security? So these are, Joe, questions around the world. In terms of what you were specifically asking, what about the Ukraine aid? It's a measure of Washington these days. It's almost impossible, at least for me, to find out exactly where that package is when I ask, because I get so many different answers.
So, Michael Watts, put the same question to you if we have any clarity as to that aid. But more than that, talk to us about how Ukraine's sort of position has changed, where over this last year or so, a little bit less reliant on the United States.
Well, The Economist just did an analysis saying that as many as 500,000 Russian soldiers are dead, 1.5 million are wounded. That's about 2 to 3% of Russia's pre-war population taken off the chessboard, right? This was a war that was meant to be 2 weeks at the most. Russian columns at the Polish border, after they take Kyiv in 3 days. You now have a situation where Ukraine is clawing back territory on the battlefield for the first time since 2023. I think it's like 189 square kilometers. Beyond that, the ability of Ukraine to project its power well beyond its borders. They played a role in Mali in kicking Russian forces out of that country. I mentioned before, they played a minimal role in Syria, giving drone advice and aid to Syrian rebels when they wanted to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. They've done the same thing in Sudan against the Wagner Group. What did they do in the Middle East? This is one of the most unsung stories, I think, of the last several weeks. Iranian Shahid drones, which basically were pioneered in the war in Ukraine, right? They were provided to Russia. Russia has wreaked havoc and terror on Ukrainian cities using these things. They're about $20,000 a pop. Iranian Shahid drones hit a U.S. military installation in Kuwait, killed 6 American servicemen. Then they took out an AWACS command and control aircraft, hard to replace, something like over $1 billion to replace it in Saudi Arabia. We asked the Ukrainians to come in and implement their Sky Map, which is a very sophisticated piece of software using acoustics and artificial intelligence, basically an integrated air defense system designed for Iranian drones. And the Ukrainians have created anti-drone technology, counter drones. They're about $2,000. What were we doing in the first weeks of the war in Iran? Using Patriot missile interceptors, THAAD missiles, again, millions and millions of dollars of pieces of equipment and kit to take down $20,000 Iranian drones. The Ukrainians were looking at us like we had 3 heads. What are you doing? We would not exist, they said, if we were spending money and having this kind of burn rate. So, like to my point earlier, they are here to teach us now. The joke in Kyiv has been for the last 2 years, it's not a question of should Ukraine join NATO, it's when will NATO want to join Ukraine, right? So we're getting way more than we've put in. This is a colossal return on investment, but Donald Trump and his allies and surrogates in the MAGA universe don't see it that way. They still see Ukraine as this charity case.
I want to just add to that. There's this incredible Washington Post story about just the unconventionality of warfare, about how Ukrainian citizens have basically become accustomed to the drone warfare. And one of the ways they know is that they cut the fiber optic cables on these Russian drones. And this kid basically saved his village from a Russian drone attack because they just have become accustomed to this type of fighting. Just to pick up for Caddy on Michael's point there, in a kind of saner universe, you would imagine Trump, who said he could stop the Russian-Ukraine war on day one and bring peace to this conflict, that they would press the advantage now. You see Ukraine hitting in Moscow with these drones. You see all the data points that Michael pointed out there. That now would be the actual time to say, okay, you know what? You've proven yourself worthy as an ally, and we're going to start funding you and collaborating more with your intelligence community, which I know they're doing, but maybe more aggressively. We're not getting that now. If anything, Trump seems utterly distracted by a whole host of different things, the China visit, what's happening in Iran, obviously, and I know we're going to talk about it, but potentially an invasion of Cuba we're getting at. And it just seems like if he can compartmentalize a bit more, if he can actually see the strategic advantages that he possesses, things would be vastly different.
I guess the question is if he wanted to push
that's the problem.
If he wanted to put pressure on Moscow, as Sam Stein there doing his excellent host duties.
You see that,
making
Joe?
the segue,
you see that, Joe?
Making the segue, turning the corner for us. A new report, as Sam has just suggested, from Axios reveals that Cuba has acquired more than 300 military drones and could be preparing to use them against the United States. White House reporter Mark Caputo cites classified intelligence shared with Axios, detailing how Cuba has started discussing plans to possibly use the drones to attack the U.S. base at Guantanamo Bay, U.S. military vessels, and Key West.